as I was explaining to the punters out there, the idea behind this version of the claw, where we have an expert student of the market like yourself, is that we talk about market history, company history, in order to demonstrate the point that, you know, it makes good sense to pay attention. So we decided to have a little quiz session, and the idea was that we would talk about the resources sector of the market.
So, because resources is our market, still the dominant space in our market.
Exactly, like 45% or something. So the history of these assets, very important. So I'm going to start with the easiest question of the lot, and that is, what is the corporate background to BHP Billiton? And as an entree to that, who is Brian Gilbertson?
Well, I mean, BHP Billiton comes from, back in the 90s, we had a local company called Gencor.
Correct.
Mining company. They then brought the assets of, it was a Dutch company, Billiton. They bought the mining assets, not all of them.
Right, which was the offshoot, as I recall, of Shell, right? It was the Shell mining assets that they decided were non-core.
They're no longer wanted anymore. And then we got Billiton in South Africa. They moved to London, I think 97. They moved into, they headquartered themselves in London. And then was the big merger, the big deal when they tied up with BHP from Australia. So we had Billiton, which had come out of Gencor. They then tied up with BHP out of Australia, did what was then a mega merger, absolutely mega merger, creating one of the biggest resource stocks in the world, trading on, the Dutch are now completely forgotten, trading on the Sydney Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, and Johannesburg.
And that's an important wrinkle, because of course that explains why we've got this sort of dual listed structure with Australia and New York and London and Joburg, right?
Exactly, and all the separate domains. I mean, I think many folks, I know I do, we still think BHP Billiton is a South African company. I'm not sure how much Gencor there really is still there. I mean, the assets were really scattered all around. They still got operations in South Africa, but really they're global.
Because you're right, because Gencor, as I am now reminded, was in fact a merger of the Union Corporation and General Mining. And General Mining was best known for having launched those gold mines in the Free State, which are like Evander and so on, which nobody, you know, owns anymore, wants to admit to owning. I think they're part of what Harmony, or part thereof, and that's all passed by. But the corporate history, of course, has evolved on the global scene, and we now have BHP Billiton owning these kind of first-tier assets around the world, totally.
Yeah, and almost in a sense, the history of our mining. Mining in South Africa was gold. We were the biggest gold miner for how long, and now we're sort of number 4 on the list, and before we know it, Botswana is going to overtake us in gold mining.
And within Billiton, the big assets of the iron ore, the copper in South America, the oil reserves in the Gulf of Mexico, and then all the other sort of bits and pieces around it.
They got a fair chunk of coal as well, about 20% of it's coal, metallurgical and thermal coal as well.
Metallurgical coal being the Australian operations, and then the steam and energy coal being more the sort of South African oriented stuff.
Yes, which is more to your Eskom.
But I guess your point is, you know, you create a surplus from one mining asset, you then use that to invest in, you know, exploration assets, and you're talking in this case sort of first tier stuff around the world. Okay, and then just finally, Brian Gilbertson?
CEO, made the whole deal, and if memory serves me correct, he's now in the Fabergé egg business, amongst things. Pallinghurst, I think.
Okay, because he was booted in 2002 or thereabouts, just after the merger was done. The Australian chairman, Don August, decided that he didn't like this uppity South African. So they concluded the thing, but he was then surplus to requirements, retired with a multi-million-dollar fortune. And has now got this thing called Pallinghurst, which I think is a bunch of friends of his, a son, and so I'm not sure how actively involved he is, but it's kind of a mining asset investment unlocked type.
They got some platinum assets in there. They got the Fabergé egg. There was some talk about it in this weekend's newspapers. Not sure how exciting that is, but then you're a Richmond fan. It should probably be, would fit in Richmond stable,
I think. That is super luxury goods. If you're really that crazy, you want a few like encrusted eggs in your lounge.
And also gemstones. What he's trying to do really there is try and find industries that are not very well put together and really shake up the entire industry. So like the gemstone industry, where no one's talking, there's no synergies happening. He's trying to really shake them up, create efficiencies and value for his holdings in those processes.
Especially gemstones outside of diamonds. Okay, right, you get to ask a question now.
Sticking with it, and Billiton, the biggest stock in our market, well, BTI is, but we don't really count BTI in terms of indices. And I thought, what's our big asset? We used to be a gold mining country, now we're a platinum country. We know that South Africa is the biggest platinum country, but who are the 5 platinum countries? We're number 1. Who are the other 4 in terms of large platinum production? In fact, there are only 5 platinum producers in the world. Okay,
I can think of 2 or 3 immediately. So obviously Zimbabwe has got to be on that list because of the Great Dyke, which we know Impala are active in, Aquarius are there too. Then there are the Russians, And there we're talking principally about that quirk of nature, Norilsk, which produces nickel, but then has the platinum and palladium as a byproduct.
And oddly enough, Russia actually comes in number 2 in terms of production. They're so far behind South Africa is what, 60, 70% of global production, but they come in at number 2.
Okay, so I've got to get the order right.
Well, no, the order's fine. Zimbabwe's last, Russia's second. There's 2 you're missing.
Okay, now I'm thinking
numbers 3 and 4.
Canada is in there somewhere because there's that Stillwater operation, and then the United States as well.
Bingo. US comes in at number 3, just pipping Canada at number 4. Zimbabwe coming number 5, but I can't help thinking it's because of the situation in Zimbabwe, and probably if the political situation was better,
assets than production.
We could actually.
I mean, so the interesting thing here is that South Africa dominates. It's a very important global industry given the tie into auto catalysts. But the global production is spread around enough, just enough, so that everybody's kind of comfortable we must use this stuff. Because I'm aware of a couple of other sort of rare minerals and other things that are in China or Mongolia and so on. And people just rub their hands and say, listen, we've got to find some alternative, substitutive method.
So platinum is kind of
a bit overlocated, but not so overlocated that it gets rejected as a technology.
Yeah, that stranglehold's not quite there. And so Russia, surprisingly, at number 2.
Excellent, right. My next question is, who is the owner of Mamelodi Sundowns and how did he make his money?
Mamelodi Sundowns. I thought we were talking stocks. We're moving into, okay, so it's got to be one of the BEE guys out there.
Okay.
It's not going to be Cyril Ramaphosa. It's going to be Patrice Motsepe.
Bingo.
I'm imagining.
Bingo.
Patrice Motsepe is African Rainbow Minerals,
Correct.
ARI, as it's known on the code.
Okay.
There. Where did he make his money? It was a BE deal, and I got ABSA sticking in my head somewhere.
Go back, because obviously the assets that he brought into African Rainbow Minerals, with the point it got named African Rainbow Minerals, were gold assets. So what I'm looking for is he made his first fortune in getting into the gold business.
Yes.
As a partner to Harmony.
It was Harmony. He came and he got a Bernard Swanepoel, the deal with Bernard Swanepoel. We're talking, what, this was early 2000, no, late 90s probably even.
So his genius was really 2 well-timed transactions. Firstly, he gets into the gold business when nobody wants those assets at the sort of late 90s.
Just as gold's at $300
Just as gold goes kaboom and gets big. And then, just as gold is about to kind of get its comeuppance because of the strengthening rand and all the rest of it, whoops, he trades his Harmony stake and pushes Harmony into a relationship with African Rainbow Minerals, converts his interest into African Rainbow Minerals, boom, just in time for the iron ore boom.
I was going to say, because you've got Assmang, he owns half of that, with Assor owning the other half of Assmang, and
Correct.
That's iron ore. We saw reports in, I think, a couple of weekends ago that price is going to stay above 150. And if it does, iron ore is becoming seriously valuable, and Patrice can buy himself a few more soccer teams.
You know, some people have got good timing, and Patrice is definitely one of those. Right.
I want to go with, we used to have an index called the Resi 20. As we started off saying, once upon a time, this was a mining country. Not quite so much anymore. Resi 20's now become downgraded to Resi 10. What are the stocks in it? Some of them are quite easy. When I was looking at it, some of them were a little more harder. The big ones are the easy ones. Start with the big ones.
Okay, so not being a stock-specific guy myself, I don't pay a lot of attention to what's in the Resi. But does this thing, give me a pointer before we start, does this thing have the dual-listed global stocks in it?
Correct, it does.
So it's got the Billitons, it's got the Anglos, it's got Amplats, it's got Impala, it's going to have African Rainbow Minerals.
Got them, yep, so far you're spot on.
I need another big one, so Assor would be there.
Assor's not there.
Okay.
Assor's top 40, but not Resi 10. It's got some gold miners.
So I'm going to be looking Goldfields, then Harmony and Anglo Gold.
Not Harmony, Anglo Gold Ashanti. Harmony doesn't
so
quite get it.
Discerning list. And then does it have the likes of Sasol in it as well?
Sasol's in it, and you're missing 2. The one's a biggie. I'm surprised you haven't got that one. Think Escor, think
ArcelorMittal.
Exara. The other part there.
Okay.
And then number 10, which was the one that really surprised me a whole lot. Little platinum player.
Aquarius?
Lonmin.
Big enough to make the index.
Just sneaks in, and I just for interest's sake, I pulled their returns over the last decade. Lonmin comes bang last, 10-year return, total return over the last 10 years, 32%. That was not a fun investment to have been in.
Here's a question for you. Is that Resi, if you plot that and look at it in relation to our all-share index, do you see strong chart recognition, strong pattern recognition?
Yeah, you do. There's a fair link between, not so much the all-share perhaps, but certainly the top 40.
Yes.
You get a fair tie between them because of, the Resi 10 is pretty much, as we said already, half of that top 40. The rest are some banks, some industrials.
And is it a tradable instrument? In other words, you can buy a ETF which tracks the Resi 10?
Exactly, you can buy the ETFs. South Africa's got the ETFs on the Resi 10,
okay.
and ABSA's got the RAFI ETFs on the Resi 10 at the same time. But they're just waiting on some fundamental stuff to try and give some outperformance.
Some secret measure that they don't like to talk about.
Research affiliate fundamental indexation. Actually, theirs is the E-RAFI because I suppose it's electronic.
Okay, here's my last question, and this is a bit of a joke one. It says, what cycles have we experienced in commodity prices in the last 500 years, and where to next?
Well, we've had complete boom, we've had complete bust, we've had everything in between. I suppose in South Africa, I mean, it really started out in Barberton, which was, if I recall, the first exchange was in Barberton, and it was gold.
Okay.
And then we got gold moved sort of more to the reef. We got diamonds in Kimberley, which another exchange in Kimberley. We had a lot of them. We had a stock exchange in Pietermaritzburg, of all places.
In fact, this was a very uninteresting country until gold and diamonds were discovered.
No. And it's why Johannesburg is one of the few capital cities in the world that isn't on a natural piece of water.
Okay, but what I'm looking for more here is if you look at the past 500 years of like iron ore prices and things like that, the big surges that we see correspond with economic events and or global conflicts. So am I correct in saying that if you see like in the late 1800s, you see the big sort of surge by the US industrialization, the building of the railroads and all that, then we go quiet again. First World War, Second World War, Japan, China, blah, blah, blah.
70s, although oddly the surge was the oil price, which then also led into gold, but gold was Nixon taking the US off the gold standard in 1972. That surge in the oil price was really OPEC exerting their power, and perhaps that was one of the first times when politics led a surge rather than what's happening on the ground, the industrialization really leading a surge into it now. And we're currently finding ourselves sitting in as that emerging market, driven predominantly by China and India. And a lot of folks are saying, you know what, India is going to actually ultimately be a bigger driver in this space perhaps than China.
But if we're sticking to our theories, ultimately, I don't know whether it's 2020, 2030, 2040 or whatever, and they've done all of the industrializing that these countries need, then you would expect a certain retrenchment in resource intensity and resource prices, arguably.
Absolutely. Some of them there's always going to be some sort of need, but the need at the moment is into building dams and power plants and all of these type of things, and that's going to have happened. And then there's that interesting spin where we start seeing, and we're away from it, it's not our lifetime, we start seeing population decreases on planet Earth as is happening in Japan. That's just a natural progression which you would see. And when that happens, then you've got to say commodities is the last place you want to be. In fact, chatting with Keith McLachlan, we think the place to be then is health, because you want to keep people living for longer.
Unless we're building a space rocket to the moon by then that takes up all the spare iron ore. Okay, I
got a last question, and this one completely fascinated me. Anglo American Corporation, founded in 1917 with £1 million, formed by two gentlemen. One of them, Sir Ernest Oppenheimer, we obviously know about that. The second person, an American, a name, I mean, it's a company who we know, but not in the mining space anymore.
Engelhard.
No, bigger than that.
An American.
An American chap, now famous as a banker.
Rockefeller?
Morgan. JP Morgan formed Anglo American with Sir Ernest Oppenheimer in 1970.
Funded it that first initial outset.
He was the funder behind it, I'm imagining. I suppose he was the banker back then even, put the cash into it.
Anglo American.
And had no longer involved in it, but an interesting link. We all know the JP Morgans, we all know the Anglo story. And I went and I found 3 places to confirm it because it was such an odd link. But as you say, he was the banker, he was the money man.
Excellent.